All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our next story. Rising prices of goods and services in Nigeria due to galloping inflation means that workers are banking on a pay rise as a way out of the resulting economic hardship. As workers are getting ready for the May Day celebration, they have high expectations on a new national minimum wage. But organized labor is also asking the government to stabilize the naira, make the economy attractive to foreign investors, and friendly to small businesses, as well as improve the living conditions of citizens. Nigerians watch with keen interest outcome of of the negotiations between labor and the government on the new minimum wage in the coming days. Adeoye, let me kick off with you.
Well, May Day is coming. That should be next week. And
Wednesday.
yes, traditionally we expect labor to come up with basic demands. And from the statements we read this week, we can draw conclusions that labor will be talking about more jobs, dealing with poverty, inflation, resolving the economic situation to make it favorable to workers. And of course, the Nigerian Labour Congress is the largest labor force in the country. So it's a force to be reckoned with, and one of the oldest. Mm-hmm. So the NLC and the TVC, they are very formidable institutions. And we should also recall that in January, there was the National Minimum Wage Committee, which was inaugurated by the Vice President. And I think it brought in 37 member committee, brought in a lot of people from labor, from other sector, corporate institutions, and to talk about a new minimum wage, because the law says that every 5 years, you need to, the labor law, review the minimum wage. So it's most likely we may be having demands, basically for increment in workers' salaries. However, I think now we have 30,000 naira. I've read some of the snippets from the recommendations made by NLC. At the risk of being immodest, I think some of those recommendations are not realistic. In the first place, the NLC and TUC are not on the same page. Yes. And I think the NLC that we know, you will sit down and look at the figures. You get accountant, experts. If we pay so amount, what will be the implication for the economy? And in reality, can we afford, the country afford this particular minimum wage? So it has to be within the context of the dynamics of Nigerian GDP, income, and expenditure. So, but I've read about the demands that, with a lot of variables, that Southwest should pay 794,000 naira, South 850,000 naira, North Central 709,000. Then TVC is talking, TUC is talking about 447,000 naira. For me, I agree that there should be increment, but I don't think these figures will be easy to negotiate with either the state or the federal government. Because even when you look at what happened in the past, from 18,000 to 30,000 naira, a marginal increase of about maybe 66% or thereabout. So if the minimum wage is 30,000 naira, if we are talking about 100% increase, which I don't think will happen, that can only give you 60,000 naira. So the demand for 709,000 naira, I think we also need to look at the implication on the economy itself. You remember what happened, I think, in 1973, the Udoji Award, and the implication on the economy. If you start paying excessively what you cannot afford, more people will lose their jobs, and there will be spiraling, in fact, inflation, that people will put up so many prices that people, Nigerians will find it very difficult to contend with. So I think labor needs to work with government to look at a figure that is realistic, that is meaningful, that is affordable, even in the context of our complaints that the governments, the state governments and federal government flamboyant, reckless in spending. But even then, you have to look at what is the GDP of the country, what is the income, what is the expenditure, so that the states can pay what they can afford. It's of no use when you ask people to pay about, even doctors, medical doctors, how much, professors, how much do they earn? So if you want minimum wage of 700,000 naira, I think it is far from being realistic.
Right.
I hope that we'll all sit down together in the spirit of national interest to agree on a minimum wage that is realistic, that is meaningful, and is accessible to all of us.
All right. Mikhail, first, it's sad to see that TUC and NLC are not on the same page. TUC is now saying that the announcements Nigerians are waiting for may not come.
And yes, I think that those who felt that there will be a new minimum wage announced on May 29 by the president, I think they are being extremely optimistic, because this kind of negotiations take a long time. If within the labor family, they are even struggling to agree on a figure, how do you expect the tripartite committee to get everyone singing from the same hymn book within so short a time? The committee was not set up on time, and progress has been really slow. TUC earlier quoted the sum of 447,000 as the new minimum wage, but Osifo, the president of TUC, is now saying that it has harmonized that figure with the NSC, and that their current figure now stands at 615,000 naira. So, which means the TUC has moved away from 447,000 to 615,000. There is no way that this minimum wage can be paid, because it's too high. I can tell you today that even the 30,000 minimum wage, some states are not paying. We were here last week, we were discussing Abia, and the NLC was pleading with the Abia governor to please pay. Some states are still paying 18,000 minimum wage. They are still paying 18,000. Several years after, it got to 30,000, they refused to pay. They are still paying 18 when the minimum wage is 30. So, are those states the kind of states that will now pay 615? Because when you call it minimum wage, it is backed by law. And whether you are in public service or private whatever, you are supposed to abide by the minimum wage law. Now, the private companies, hotels that hire cleaners, chefs, attendants, and the rest of them, can they pay this to the most junior person? Because minimum wage is not meant for everybody. Minimum wage is meant for the lowest rung on the ladder. But we also know that every time you increase minimum wage, consequential adjustments happen. Otherwise, because usually maybe minimum wage will affect levels 1 to 7, workers on levels 1 to 7. So if it affects levels 1 to 7, they will eventually catch up with their bosses, their seniors, unless those seniors benefit from consequential adjustments necessitated by a new minimum wage. That's what happens every time we increase minimum wage. Of course, we've not been able to, again, respect the law by reviewing the minimum wage every 5 years. During the last dispensation, the law was not followed. The law was not followed because Goodluck Jonathan increased minimum wage in 2011. By 2016, President Buhari should have.
All right.
increased, but that didn't happen.
Thank you. Kindly hold your thoughts while we take Johnson from Water. Good afternoon, Johnson.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, concerning the minimum wage, I think the right thing for the labor and TUC, whatever it is, we call them, is let them engage experts to assist in this matter. It's a serious issue, so we don't end up creating a bigger problem than what we are trying to solve through the minimum increase in the minimum wage. All this they're asking for, there is no way any government in Nigeria can afford to pay that. They should also know that it is not about government alone. Private sector employs more people. Where they were in an economy that is the way we are now, where did they expect them to get that money to pay? It's not possible. Otherwise, we will create a kind of inflation that we will not be able to handle. So they should engage experts that can assist them. They need a set skill to handle this, which I think they don't have with the figure they are asking, they are demanding for. So they should.
All right, thank you so much, Johnson. Thank you for your contribution. BK, would you like to land your thoughts?
What I'm saying is, if minimum wage gets as high as this, you know, as I said earlier, it's not the junior workers alone who benefit. Every time you increase minimum wage, all categories of workers benefit, because steps must be taken to ensure that those juniors, like level 1 to 7, for example, don't begin to earn higher than their bosses or catch up with their bosses. So their bosses too will get some percentage increment on their salaries, maybe 10%, 20%, depending on the level. The higher you are on the ladder, the lower the percentage by way of increment that you will get. Right. So what it means is that it will it will make the wage bill by far higher. So what you are looking for won't be simply the money that you need to pay those junior workers. You are looking for money to add to the salaries of everybody. Yes. So that is the implication of a new minimum wage that people must realize. And if it is this high, 615, it means that even the percentage of the consequential increment, the percentage that will go to the other categories of workers will be very high. The higher this is, the higher the consequential increment for the other categories of workers, like those senior workers. Whether it's level 16 or 17, they will get something. Right. So government will have to sit down and then ask, what kind of minimum wage can we pay that would ensure that you do not bankrupt the country or find it difficult to pay every month.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on. The new Electricity Act